It's 10 o'clock. I'm Mike Carlisle. I'm the Executive Director from Texas Tropical Trail Region from Corpus Christi. We have 43 people signed up to join us today for our 14th virtual partner event. And this is our 185th partner event. And Fire Bates couldn't join us today because she has another commitment in Austin. And before we get started, we overlooked something we didn't mention last month, and that's we really want to thank Susan Trevino for donating the tours for our gifts, for the historical tour gift certificates for our drawing related to our survey drawing last week. And Pat Russo was the lucky winner last month. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jace Tunnell, the director at the Mission-Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve, and he's going to share some information about the research and education conducted at the Mission-Aransas Reserve. And if you're like myself, you've seen a lot of his fantastic videos that he's shared on the Facebook. He's does a lot of the stuff on the beach.
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me. Like Mike said, I'm at the Mission-Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve and located here at the University of Texas Science Institute. And we were designated in 2006. And we're located here in Port Aransas, Texas. And so I'll kind of just tell you a little bit about our program, some of the projects we have on, and then really some of the beachcombing type videos and stuff that we do to try to keep people connected to not only the research that we're doing, but also what's washing up on the beach. You know, the things that, why do we live in Corpus Christi? A lot of people come here for the beach. And so, okay, we can go to the next slide. There's actually 29 National Estuarine Research Reserves around the country. They're all place-based. So kind of our place that we do our core work is the Aransas Bay and the Copano Bay area. And so how we have our name is the Mission River and the Aransas River that go into Copano Bay. So Mission-Aransas, that's how we get our name. All these others around the country, they're located, East Coast, West Coast. There's 5 of us in the Gulf of Mexico. We have a lot of projects and stuff we do together. But our main kind of mission is to educate people about estuaries. And so to do that, we do research and training programs, and we actually have K through 12 education programs, things like that. So I'll tell you a little bit about those. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I told you about Mission and Aransas. This is just sort of a map so you can see what I was talking about. You have, Copano and Aransas Bay systems here. This map shows the rivers that come in, Mission River and Aransas River. And then it also has different types of habitats. And so that's a lot about what we educate folks on is like, why are these habitats important? What's utilizing them and how can we protect them? Okay, and we all know about the whooping crane, so I put a whooping crane up. But our facilities are here in Port Aransas. We're right on the jetty, so if anybody's gone across the ferry, across the Aransas ship channel, on the left-hand side, you'll see that from the ferry anyway, you'll see that we have our campus. We have about 150 people that are here, probably about 30 students. At Mission-Aransas, we have about a little over 20 full-time and part-time staff. And I'll tell you about some of the sectors that they work in. Okay, next slide. And a lot of the work that we do, we're really, you'll see we do a lot of different things. And the only way that we're able to do that is because of partners that we work with. So we have a lot of folks that we work on some of their property. They're within our boundaries. Also some other ones that give us funding to be able to do some of the projects that we do. But all the work, we always concentrate on the partnerships because really that's how we're able to do all the good things I'm going to talk about. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So we're all of the reserves I just talked to you about, all 29 of them, we all have 4 sectors that we have in common. We all use the same methodologies for getting our research. We use the same equipment, so you can compare one site, what's going on here in Texas, to what's going on in Alaska. Easy comparison. Plus, we also have a lot of the same education programs. But here at the reserve, we actually have a fifth sector. And you probably heard about this one. That's the Amos Rehabilitation Keep. And we rehab sea turtles and birds. And so we're the only research reserve in the country that does that. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. Okay, next slide. So when looking at our education programs, we do a lot of that here on the campus of the university. And we have this place called the Wetlands Education Center, which is a trail system around a man-made wetland. And there's signs on there that tell you about, different types of habitats you'll see, different types of birds and fish. And so this is open 24/7. So people can walk around this anytime they want. And then we also have tours that we give. And the tours are at 10 a.m. on Monday and Wednesday. And so people can come out to those whenever they like. Okay, next slide. Another thing that you might have heard about, which has gotten a lot of media over the last couple of years, is a citizen science project we have called Nurdle Patrol. Nurdles are little plastic pellets that are the raw material to everything plastic. We're finding them washing up on beaches and rivers and lake shorelines. So people go out for 10 minutes, they search for these little pellets, and then they go to nurdlepatrol.org and put how many they found within that time and where they're at, and it shows up on a map, and it's color-coded a map based on the concentration of pellets found. And so we're able to actually take this information, see where the problem areas are, and try to change policy in the permits for plastic manufacturing facilities to try to improve the containment of these pellets so they're not getting out into the waterways, which the biggest impact is to wildlife eating them. Okay, next slide. Also here on campus is the Amos Rehabilitation Keep I was telling you about. We have a lot of volunteers that help out here. We actually have 6 staff members that work here, and it's all to rehab sea turtles and birds. It was started by Tony Amos, which is how it got its name, back in 1982. And that first year, he had about 7 animals that came into the facility. And now, looking in at 2020 and 2021, we average around 1,500 animals. And so it's a big process and program to be able to run. And it costs us about close to $400,000 a year to be able to run this facility. Okay, next slide. And now the beach survey. So this was what Mike was mentioning earlier. We do have a contract because of the BP oil spill. We were able to receive some money, and it's a 10-year-long period of funding that we get to be able to do beach surveys. Now, the primary reason we do these beach surveys is looking for certain species of shorebirds. We look for stranded sea turtles, and we look for nesting sea turtles, and for marine mammals. But we also take pictures of different things that are washing in to tell people about, what's coming in, tell them a little bit about the area of where they live, and allow people to ask us questions and stuff like that. And so this is just an example of some of the images that we post on our Mission-Aransas Facebook page. If you're interested in seeing what's washing in, what the latest is, these are the types of posts, and we'll put exactly what they are and all that kind of stuff. So get on there if you want to see some more about that. Okay, next slide. So specifically what we're looking for, stranded sea turtles can come in different species, sizes, times of the year. So all throughout the year, we're going out almost on a daily basis, getting dead sea turtles that come in. The majority of sea turtles we have here that come in are the green sea turtles. Then we also find a lot of big loggerhead sea turtles. Some of them are hit by boats. Some are entangled in fishing line. Some of them are just old. Different reasons they come in. And so we have veterinarians that we work with that do surgery on them, give them medication. We have x-ray machines and lasers, stuff like that. Then for the birds, we really look for piping plovers is one of them we look for. We also look for red knots, snowy plovers, some of these more endangered type species. And we look for tagged ones, and then we give that information over to the USG, the United States Geological Service, that monitors where these birds are so that they can help track where the species was found the last. And then they tell us where they were actually tagged and where they've been found in previous years. So we can relay that information to folks. And then marine mammals, when we find them, typically they're dead, unfortunately, but we have a process we go through for getting skin samples, measuring them, pulling teeth so that we can age them, making sure it's the right species, stuff like that. Okay, next slide. What we found, and whenever COVID hit, people were not able to get to the beach. People did not want to go out to the beach. Well, I think they did want to go to the beach because there was like a huge flux of people, but a lot of people couldn't go on vacations and stuff like that. So we wanted people to know, what was washing up, and we wanted to teach them a little something. So rather than just photos, we started doing videos. So this was in probably April of 2020, we started this. Every Monday at 1 p.m., we post a new video on our YouTube channel at Mission-Aransas and on our Facebook page. And we have a couple of different Facebook pages we posted on, but Mission-Aransas is the key one. And we do a different topic every Monday. And we've been doing it. We have about 80 episodes now. And so we talk about things that you might not even know are there. They're on the beach, but you might not know to look for them. So we try to educate folks about what that is. So if you want to binge watch all these, I would say your best bet is to go to YouTube. We have a playlist on Mission-Aransas Research Reserve page. You can click on the playlist for beachcombing, and all of these will come up, and you can just go one through another. You need to probably spend a couple days watching all these things. Okay, let's go to the next one. We also have a volunteer program. So if you want to do some hands-on helping out, you can work with the sea turtles, you can work with the birds, you can help do tours through the Wetlands Education Center. We've also got the Nurdle Patrol. That's something that you can go out and do on your own. Go to the beach, and it's a good excuse to get out and go to the beach and do a 10-minute survey looking for these little pellets. And then what's coming up this next year, probably by next summer, we're going to have the Patton Marine Science Education Center that's opening up. And some of y'all probably been to our visitor center before Hurricane Harvey. It's been closed for 4 years because of Hurricane Harvey, but we're redoing it right now. And there's going to be huge aquaria in there, and there's going to be touch tanks, and there's going to be all kinds of interactive things for families to come in and learn about what's in the ocean and in the estuaries. And so if you want to volunteer with us, feel free to give me my email, or send me an email, which is coming up in the next slide. Okay, next slide. This is my last slide. And if you want any more information, contact info for people that work here, including myself, links to social media, anything I talked about, go to missionaransas.org and you can find it there. And then here's my email at the bottom, jace@utexas.edu. Feel free to send me an email, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jace. And does anybody have any questions?
I do, Michael. Jace, what is your background? What did you study for to get this job as director?
People ask me that every day. So, why do you get to be on the beach every day? You get paid. So I actually grew up here in Corpus Christi, fourth generation. Was born in Taft when they used to have a hospital. I think it's a old folks home or something like that now. I don't know. There's no more hospital in Taft. But I ended up going to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, got a bachelor's in vertebrate biology. And then I got a master's in marine science. And then I worked in Florida, in West Palm Beach for about 5 years with a group out there. Ended up moving back to Corpus in 2006 and working for the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries program, where I was the director of research and planning over there. Did that for close to a decade. And then about 7 years ago, I got the position as director here at the Mission-Aransas Research Reserve. And so, you know, I worked with Tony Amos real close, and it just, when he passed away right after Hurricane Harvey hit about 4 years ago, I just sort of kind of fell into the role of not exactly what he was doing. We kind of modified it because he was working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So we split it into two. So I work with a partner, Alicia Walker, who runs the animal side of the rehabilitation keep, and I took over the surveys that that Tony Amos was doing. And it's not in quite the detail Tony was doing. I mean, he was an amazing man, and he did some wild research for over 40 years, every other day on the beach. I get to get out there about twice a week.
Well, it's
Now,
fascinating.
I know Steve Lanew's on here. I see he worked out here for many years. It's good to see you, Steve.
Yes, sir. And we also probably should point out that you're second generation genius, since your dad was West Tunnell, world-class marine biologist, diver, and assistant director at Hart Institute. So you come from good genes.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So when growing up, going to the beach, what I did was, it wasn't just playing in the water. It's like, okay, I'm driving down the National Seashore, and I'm 7 years old doing bird surveys all the way down, to the Mansfield. That was my time at the beach, doing surveys early.
Well, I'm glad it's being recorded because my husband's not home, but I know he's going to be so interested in all of this. You may get a volunteer.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for such a great program. I'm just always amazed at how you identify those ancient, sometimes I'll find ancient stuff and it's just clueless. I see things like that. I'd have no idea what it was, but I appreciate you sharing that. And with that, we'll move on to our next program, and it's Dr. Mendoza-Garcia. She's the artistic director of the Gabriela Mendoza-Garcia Ballet, Folklorico, and she earned her doctorate degree in critical dance studies from the University of California, Riverside, California, sorry. And so I'll turn it over to you now. Let me get your presentation.
Sure.
Here.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today talking to everyone. I'm from Laredo, Texas, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my aunt's book. My aunt was San Juanita Martinez Hunter, and she passed away 5 years ago, but this was her dissertation. She wrote it in 1984, and she had asked me over and over if I could please get it published for her. And, things just got in the way. So after she passed away, I did that. So this is the book. I'm going to read a little bit about Mexican history, but see how it incorporates, and we still dance it today in Texas. So go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. So we ask, what is folklorico dance? And go ahead and click on all the little features there. They're living traditions that are passed down from family to family and student to student. So dances that are taught from one generation to the next. One of the most specific characteristics you can hear is our percussive footwork dances. When we dance, our feet are the drums we keep the rhythm of the music, okay? So we have intricate percussive footwork sequences. We call them costumes, but really they were the clothing of the people during a specific time period. Go ahead and go on to the next little, they're accompanied by musical compositions. Some of the most famous are the mariachis. When you hear them playing all over with their big sombreros, we dance to those. And also, go ahead and do the next one, is their dances of a community of people living in a specific time period. So you have the dances, we have religious dances, those are called danzas that you do for religious ceremonies. And we have bailes, which are danced during parties, fiestas, festivals. And then we also have dances that are specifically choreographed for the stage. So remember, these are Mexican folkloric dances. Yeah, go ahead and you can click on all. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Okay, in my aunt's book, there's so many different indigenous people that live in Mexico, but she decided to focus on the Aztec people. And we know that for the Aztec people, dance and music was so important. Why? Because they would have buildings specifically dedicated to teaching music and dance. And I would not have been a dance teacher in the Aztec people. First of all, because I'm a woman, but second of all, because the priests were the ones who taught the dances. And they taught ceremonial and religious dances. And oftentimes when they danced for these ceremonial dances, they would dance and their costumes would imitate the gods, okay? Elaborate costumes imitating the gods. And they also, don't get me wrong, they also danced for festivals and they had balls and things like that too. They had fertility dances too. They were considered indecent by the Spanish, and they would mimic animals and plants and wear animal skins, the plumage of feathers. So you would see these elaborate masks and capes and feathers worn. Go ahead and go on to the next one, please. Yeah, go ahead and click on 3 little things. Yeah, so this is, you can see this is the circle dance. And what would usually happen is the drummers or the musicians would be in the center, and then they would have concentric rings of people dancing. If you were a nobleman or an emperor or someone of high society, you would be following the musicians all the way down to the lower class people. And, you know, the Aztec dances honor the heavenly beings, the sun, the moon, the stars. They honored war gods. And when they had these grand balls that would take place in their ballrooms, the nobles and everybody would dance together, okay, but in this kind of stratified way. Go ahead and go on to the next one, please. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 little things. Yeah. Okay, so for the religious dances, only the men danced. The women danced sometimes, but when they did, they would not have any bodily contact. And of course, if you were very wealthy, you had the most elaborate attire, right? So made out of the finest fabrics with elaborate feathers. And we use basically percussive instruments. You can see in the picture here that they have like these maracas or these shakers in their hands. They have kind of a wooden xylophone. If you can see the person, it's called a teponazzi. And they used the shells, conchas, they would blow and it would make it like a sound coming out, and also attach it to pieces of leather or animal skin and put them around their ankles and their wrists. So as they're dancing, they're making noises. They had oboes made of reed, wood, and bones, whistles, horns, flutes, and they were very elaborate compositions. Go ahead and go on to the next one. Okay, and go ahead and click. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Okay, so we have the Spanish colonization, which began in 1520 to 1910. Hernan Cortes conquered Mexico, and the Spanish, what better way to convert the indigenous people to Christianity than through music and dance? So go ahead and go on to the next one. They brought these dances from Spain. They're called dance dramas. And the dance dramas told stories, religious stories. So here we have depicted the story of the Moors versus the Christians, and they still dance it today. You have a mass that would represent the Moors, mass that would represent Christians, and you would dance in a mock battle, all right? Today in my hometown of Laredo, Texas, we dance the Matachines dance. And some people say it came from the Moors and Christians, and other people say it was an indigenous dance. But basically it's dance for the Virgin Mary. That's when it's most commonly danced for. It is one of these old ancient dances that's still passed on today. And you can see it dance not only in Laredo, Texas, but all through different parts of Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, where these dance traditions have been going on for centuries. Go ahead and click on to the next one. I think the video is coming up. Yeah, go ahead and click onto the video at the bottom. So this is an example of one of the oldest dance traditions in my hometown.
How can you measure faith? There's no way to measure faith. Make sure that you dance really good. And the Matachines, they dance. Something to offer back for all the blessings we had for the whole year. My brothers, Javier and Reynaldo, and myself have been keeping this tradition alive because we learned from very good people, my father and my uncle Pedro. The Matachines is like a church built to a church.
There are other groups of matachines here in Laredo, but our group has roots. Los matachines de la Santa Cruz originated in the state of San Luis Potosí, Mexico. They started migrating to the United States in 1930. They landed in Dolores, Texas. The families that are now are descendants from the ones that started in Dolores, Texas.
It's tradition, it's part of our heritage. We can have gatherings of 200 people. We already celebrated our 75th year. It's exciting and the people love it.
The matachines de la Ladera perform twice a year. One of them is May 3rd, Dia de la Santa Cruz, and December 12th, which is for La Virgen de Guadalupe. Some of the parts for the fiesta involve music, art, and dance.
People here love the fiesta, they love the tradition. The people here contribute with donations, cooking the food, setting up tables. All the relatives, cousins, and they show up from out of town, some from out of state. A lot of it's family and friends.
Okay, so just to give you an idea about how our dance traditions continue, but I'm going to go ahead and talk really quickly about the jarabes and sones. After the Spanish colonial period, well, during the Spanish colonial period, you had people immigrating from different parts of the world, from Asia, from Africa, from all parts of Europe. They brought their music, their customs, their language, their food with them, and their way of life. And so the Mexicans made their own dance traditions, uniquely their own. Go ahead and click on the next one. The most famous is the sones and the jarabes of Mexico. The son jarocho is what we still dance today. It was started in the 18th century. And go ahead and click on the next slide if you can. I'm going to show you a little video of the son jarocho that we dance today. And it was part of a history and folklore footage, yeah. So this is my group dancing outside the bridge, the international bridge between Mexico and the US. Okay, so this is one of the sones passed down since the 18th century from Veracruz. As you can see, we still dance it today. To see where this is part of a documentary series with the Webb County Heritage Foundation. And it was during that pandemic, we went to different locations in our city of Laredo, Texas, historic locations. And they filmed us dancing. And so if you want to see a little bit more about it, you can go onto their Facebook page. But go ahead and go on to the next slide. This is that one right there is a picture of the sones now too. Okay, go ahead and go on to the next slide. If you want to see more about what's going on in Mexico after this period, you have to read the book, Dancing Throughout Mexican History. If you want to hear more about my writings, I do have a monthly blog, and it's on my webpage called the Gabriela Mendoza-Garcia Folklorico.com. It has my whole name. And the book is available on Amazon.com. And let's see, I also have a Facebook page for my dance group called the Gabriela Mendoza-Garcia Ballet Folklorico. And to watch the series, the documentary series, go on to the Webb County Heritage Foundation Facebook page to see that. Thank you very much for having me. I don't know if you have any questions.
That was an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I love
I-
that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I just tried to show how, well, how we all have our own cultural traditions and each of us practices it in our own way in the United States today, no matter where we're from.
Right. Who makes your
Gabriela?
costumes?
Oh, some of the costumes I don't sew, but I go and I find the fabric and I find someone to sew them for me. Others are created in Mexico by my friend, Maestro Pedro Serna, who's also a dance teacher. And so we design it together and he sews them for me.
They're beautiful.
Thank you.
Gabriela, this is Pat
Yes.
Russo, and that was a fantastic program, but very quick. I took Ballet Folklorico in Corpus Christi for a few years in the mid-90s, and when I saw those costumes from Vera Cruz, it just brought a smile to my heart, and those
Aw.
steps were very tricky.
Yes, they're very difficult steps, but once you have the basic ones, you're okay.
Yeah. But thank you, that was just fantastic.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And we do look forward to someday maybe going and seeing you dance all of those dances in person. That would be awesome. And
That would be
someday,
wonderful.
yeah, we'll have to arrange that someday in the future so we can see it all in person. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to our next program. It's with Rene Ballesteros. Did I get it right? I think so. Okay. And with that, I'm going to fire up your slides here and let you take over there.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everybody attending today. Texas Tropical Trails oftentimes, comes to us, the museum, for some information presentations. We're always happy to be a part of this. I've been lucky enough to go on a couple in-person outings as well, and it's always a fantastic time. So this is part of a longer presentation, so I'm going to try and get through it in the time allotted. So, hello everybody, my name is Rene Ballesteros. I work at the Museum of South Texas History, which is here in Edinburgh, Texas, downtown Edinburgh, Texas. Next slide, please. And I wanted to start with a question. Specifically, is Dia de los Muertos Mexican? You can think about that. You can go to the next slide. It's a kind of a complex question, yes and no. It's not exclusively Mexican, but it definitely is something that is celebrated in Mexico. Now, Dia de los Muertos is based in religion, and it's through a fusion of indigenous and Roman Catholic views, at least in the Americas. It's spread through the Catholic diaspora, especially in the Americas. That's how we see it today. The practices of indigenous populations were tolerated. And then through Christian conversion, this included dances, music, and traditions like Dia de los Muertos. And the academic word is syncretism, which is very much a fusion of different religious practices. So next slide, please. So we usually think of Dia de los Muertos as done in Mexico, even here in the United States, Central America. But around these days, the 31st, November 1st, November 2nd, there's different traditions seen throughout the world. Samhain is one done November 1st, where doors are unlocked. There's a fire left to burn in the hearth all night, and gifts of food and drink that are left out for visiting spirits. In Mexico, on the altars, you see ofrendas, gifts of food and drink. In Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, All Souls Day is a time for marital matches, and this tradition is seen from the mid-18th century until even today. Next slide. In Italy, this is an interesting one. I need to do some more research to kind of find that point of origin, but oftentimes we see on altars these little sugar skulls made out of sugar with somebody's name on them, a deceased person who you're honoring. And in Italy, All Souls Day was a time for marriage proposals, and there's evidence of sugar decorations traced to about the 12th century. I'm saying this is a theory because I haven't found the actual data, but there's a theory that Italian missionaries who came to Mexico taught them to create decorations from sugar, especially in places where there were lots of plantations, sugar plantations. So they were sugar rich. They had a lot of sugar, but maybe not necessarily money to buy flowers or decorations. So with what they had, they were able to make these. And this is a tradition we see today. Next slide. And there's other celebrations around the world. So these big kites that you see on the picture on the left, That's from Guatemala. It's a kite flying celebration that's done in cemeteries linked to the Maya. And they also do etch gourds with candles, and they do parades with horse races and the drinking of chicha. This drink on the right is from Ecuador called colada morada, and it's a berry drink which is drank around this time. So you see food, you see offerings, all this is kind of consistent around this time. So we can go to the next slide. So common practices across cultures, with places with this kind of I guess, traditions, it's usually cleaning of grave sites and refurbishing of tombs, placing of flowers and candles either at the graves or in an altar, home shrines or altars, special food and drink for the season and for the occasion, and of course, church services. Go to the next slide. And there are some differences in traditions. In the traditional Catholic doctrine, November 1st is when you pray to the saints, and November 2nd is when you pray to the souls in purgatory. In Mesoamerica, before colonization, October 31st, November 1st, and even further, like there's, I've been reading on evidence of like at least 2 weeks, celebrations of this. It's during those times, it's the souls of children visit Earth. In the evening of November 1st, the dawn of November 2nd is when adult souls arrive. Christian Europe, this is kind of like just big generalization, but they traditionally saw the afterworld as a place of suffering, purgatory, not something you're looking forward to. In pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, the afterlife was often seen as a desirable place where life continues, so not something that you fear. Next slide. Okay, perfect. And now there are some differences in altars before and after Christianity. Before, you see more native things like fruits, legumes, tubers, tortillas, things that were native to the Americas, varying by country and region, of course. Afterwards, with the infusion of Christianity, you would see crucifixes and rosaries, candles, right? Before the Catholic doctrine, altars were usually made around harvest time, where fertility was important for land and family, right? Continuity. So this is a couple, now that's kind of like way big background, but I wanted to get into some of the specific things that we see. So for example, there's this tradition of calaveritas, which means literally like little skulls, but there are these calaveritas literarias, which are literary, like little poems. And they're satirical stanzas, often like kind of poking fun of political figures, even the common worker. And these are traced back to early 20th century, even like late 1800s. Still used as assignments in Mexican classrooms, and we do some here at the museum too. And rooted in the mid-19th century urban centers where there was a little bit more literacy. And beyond Mexico, they were also seen in Guatemala, El Salvador. And this, for example, is, before you go back real quick, the calaverita on the right with the dog. This is a calaverita written for Frida, la perrita rescatista. So a few years ago, there were earthquakes in Mexico City, and Frida was one of the rescue dogs who went around and found survivors, found bodies in the wreckage. So there was a calaverita and an infographic made for her. She became a celebrity. So this is kind of something that was, very modern in a way. And speaking of modern, next slide, please. We see the symbolism in Dia de los Muertos, right? The skulls, that kind of iconography, and it's infused into what we see today. I mean, if you go to any store, you usually find a Dia de los Muertos inspired socks, t-shirts, especially around this time of year. And there's an example of the Joker as a calavera, the Joker from Batman, Robin, a fantasy figure. So that's a little bit of intersectionalism. Go next slide. And this, I want to kind of get into where that iconography really kind of started and took off. So this is Jose Guadalupe Posada. He lived from 1850s until 1913. In 1913, Mexico was going through a revolution, and he was a printmaker, printing for all types of things, for newspapers, for advertisements. And he really started bringing this kind of skull iconography. And this one is a very famous photo, but you see it's a very revolution based at this time, the 1910s, Mexico was being torn apart by this. So go to the next slide. And it's a little difficult to see, but right there on the right is a picture of his taller, his print shop essentially. It says JG Posada right there. And I like this picture of the bicycles on the left. Also, it's incorporated into a lot of things of the day. Bicycles took off in the 1890s. So by early 20th century, they were definitely in Mexico. So it's kind of a period in time that's super relevant. Go to the next slide. And this is probably his most recognized work or image, La Catrina Garbancera. This was an image done by him as a print. We see this now pretty much all over the place, especially when you go to events. You see people dressed up as her with their face painted. And what this really was is it was a satire. It was saying, this is like the fancy lady of Mexico, the urban center. She's mimicking French fashion, really, because that was the focus at the time. But regardless of all the fancy things she had on her hat, she's still a calavera. She's still a skeleton in the end. So it's kind of like showing that death is the equalizer in many ways. And also a political commentary on the elite of Mexico at the time. So yeah, a little bit more than just a lady in a fancy hat, a skeleton in a fancy hat. Can we go next slide, please? Okay, awesome. And then here, this is a famous painting called Dream of a Sunday Afternoon in the Alameda Central, which is a central square in Mexico City. This is done by Diego Rivera, and it has a lot of very specific Mexican icons in here. And if you look right in the middle, you see La Catrina Garbancera. And there's a lot of others. Frida is right to her left. The woman in yellow, that's La Malinche, a figure from Mexican history. So La Catrina is front and center. And this was where Posada in life, he just had kind of a workshop. He wasn't a famous artist because of this. But in death afterwards, the Mexican Renaissance of muralism and artists looked at that iconography and kind of really brought it to the forefront. When we go next, I think I have a couple slides left. So in South Texas, the way we see Dia de los Muertos, it really is in a way like, and this is my experience over time working at the museum, really hearing different stories is a lot of cemetery visits from locals. That's what I've heard the most around this time. Not so much the altares or what we see in movies and what they really do in central Mexico, but more really just as a time of year to go and visit the cemeteries and clean up the graves as well. Next slide. And now the kind of question is where did this kind of really get a boost? And it was in the 1950s, or around 1950s, there were students in Mexico who were ridiculed for making ofrendas. They were seen as superstitious, right? In the 1960s, during the Chicano movement, a lot of these Mexican Americans started learning about their history, iconography, and deep past, and bringing this kind of iconography to the forefront. And something interesting that I heard is that murals, you don't have to be literate to read a mural. If you see something that's familiar, that speaks to you, it's accessible. In the 1970s, the Mexican Ministry of Tourism put money into this, into promoting these types of traditional artisans, indigenous traditions. And by the 1980s, there were thousands of people attending these events in central Mexico. A lot of local participation, but then government came in and really started boosting, right? As we want you to travel, we want you to come in and see these things. Really not seen in our borderlands, I guess, the way it is now until the mid 1990s. And I mean, if you all even think about the movie Coco and a couple of things, it's really gotten a boost. So next slide. I think I only have a couple more. So here's a couple of things that we do at the museum. We do our community altar exhibit. We have about 11 community altars and one in the center in our courtyard gallery room. Every year it's different folks. Some are personal, some are organizations. But this is kind of the big visual thing that we definitely see and think of now. On the right, we have a recreation, a cemetery with tombs. And last slide should be next. And of course, we wanted to invite everybody to our Dia de los Muertos event. This is going to be our 19th annual. So think about that, almost 20 years that the museum's been observing this, right? Even though it's really just kind of gotten a boost recently. So it's going to be October 30th. That's the event itself from 4 to 10. Admission does apply, but we will have our community altar exhibit up for 2 whole weeks, starting this Saturday and Sunday, and then it ends on November 6th and the 7th. And another cool thing is that this weekend, we are having free admission at the museum. So the 23rd and 24th, all day long, it's free admission to everybody. It's going to be kind of the premiere for the altars, and that's thanks to our friends at HEB. Also November 6th and the 7th, like 4 weeks from now, that will also be free admission. So we're kind of bookending our special event with free admission weekends for the community. And if y'all need anything else, you can always find me here at the museum, reach out to us. We have a lot to offer. We do this deal as Muertos, but we explore a lot of different history about the borderlands in South Texas. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, but I got kind of carried away earlier, and I neglected to mention that you're the community engagement officer for the Museum of South Texas. And from looking at all the stuff on your Facebook, and you do a great job at being that community engagement officer. And I've used your photograph of you all your makeup on. That looks fantastic. But does anybody have any questions?
Mike, I wanted to comment that a few years ago, Texas Tropical Trail Partners had an event there around this time, and they so graciously made these beautiful
Yes.
sugar skulls for us.
Yes.
And I still have mine. I have it in my kitchen all the time, and I think about that event all the time. So thank you again, Museum of South Texas History.
Of course, thank you, Ms.
Monica.
This is Molly, and I have a question about the marigolds. What is the symbol for the marigolds? I live in Tennessee right now. I'm from Edinburgh, and I'm trying to teach my granddaughter about the symbolisms and stuff. And she asked me, she says, well, why marigolds? How come we can't use our mums like what we have here in Tennessee?
Right. So specifically, I mean, in Southern Mexico, Oaxaca, and those states, marigolds, especially in history, if you look back in history, there are botanists who said they used to just grow like weeds on the side of the road. So they were a plentiful flower. They were easy to use and decorate the cemetery with. And then furthermore, their scent and color are thought to attract the souls of the loved ones when they're coming back. And if you're in Tennessee, there's also this symbolism with the monarch butterflies and their migration, that those are souls of the loved ones coming back. So you might see some that are going to make it all the way to central Mexico every year. And I've seen videos of thousands of them covering trees. So
I'll mention that to her, because she's like a little sponge, and I wish her parents would give me more leeway in bringing her down to South Texas, because I would love to introduce her to so much that's down there, all the symbolism. But I'll be sure to share that with her. She'll appreciate that. Thank you.
of course, thank you all very much.
Okay, thanks again. And with that, we'll move to our final program. It's going to be with Dinah Bowman. She's a great illustrator, artist, a nature printer, and she owns the Dinah Bowman Studio and Gallery in Portland. And I've been around her for a while in Rotary and stuff, and she's just has remarkable stories to tell about the importance of preserving natural living history through art. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and
It's all you, Dinah.
Hello, this is Dinah Bowman, and my studio and gallery is located in Portland, Texas. And I thought I would speak to y'all today about the history of nature printing. And the title of this program is called Impressions of Nature. If you want to reach me, there is an email address on the site, and the gallery, like I said, is located in Portland, Texas. Next slide, please. In the beginning, the earliest prints were handprints done by cave dwellers. And so that's the reason that's the earliest known nature print known to date, was these handprints. Next slide, please. As we progress through the ages, during early times, early pharmacists and botanists would collect plants and leaves and roots and flowers, and they would do impressions of them. And they would make essentially books of their nature prints, because common names are different in different locations. As before we had scientific classification. And so these early herbalists would then have the rubbings of their plants to compare that they were, using the same leaf or the same plant for medicinal purposes. So this is an early example of a plant rubbing from northern Syria. Next slide, please. Again, another early print there in Italy. And so this was done throughout Europe. And that's how the systemized collections started. The Queen of England has the largest collection to date of these early nature prints. Next slide, please. In our own history, and for our colonial currency, Ben Franklin proposed using plant prints in our currency, because that way it would be hard to counterfeit, because no plant is, each venation on a plant is unique. And so at an early date, this was also considered for our own history. Even Leonardo da Vinci used plant printing in some of his early artworks. Next slide, please. Henry Bradbury from England was probably the most incredible nature printer of all. And his technique involved printing plates using the actual plant and impressing it into an etching plate and printing it. But the degree of accuracy that he achieved with his technique has been lost. What's very fortunate is we do have a large number of his prints that are still available to see in collections. Next slide, please. In the 1900s, nature printers used leaves to print around other illustrations and to embellish their artistic collections. As you can see here, there's a castle or a house, and they've taken some of the leaves from the plants around the vicinity to embellish their home. And of course, then we have the rhinoceros with some embellishment on the engraving of the animal, with some enhancement using the plant rubbings. People also at that time experimented with printing other things such as lace, and other animals, bats. That was a period of a lot of experimentation with printing. Next slide, please. Now we're going into Gyotaku. I was very fortunate to be in Japan in 1968 and 69 when my dad was stationed there with the Air Force. And I saw an exhibition and demonstration of Gyotaku, which is a Japanese form of nature printing. And the early forms were with sumie ink onto paper, and then later cloth for really, really large pieces. This is wholly a Japanese technique. It was not a Chinese derivative. And on this is, a record of a fisherman's catch, that he, put on there how much the fish weighed and, where he caught it, the day he caught it, maybe the sun was shining, and then has a record of his accomplishment. Next slide, please. The direct method of printing is where the fish itself is inked. And then the cloth or paper is laid onto the fish and is massaged or rubbed, hence printing or rubbing. Then the paper or cloth is lifted off and you have the imprint of the fish. Usually the only details added after that time are, you know, spots or shadows, the eye, and so that is this basic printing technique, the direct printing technique. Next slide, please. We have a lot of nature printers in the vicinity that do plant printing. In fact, there are more plant printers than there are fish printers. And so they're doing contemporary art. And next slide, please. And making garments and other fine art pieces. So it's taken, you know, another trip toward, you know, creativity. Next slide, please. This is a print by a contemporary print by a Japanese artist. As you can see, now we're exploring color, and it gets even more interesting as time goes on. Next slide, please. As you see here in the upper left corner with the Hawaiian fish, there's an abstracted watercolor or acrylic background, and then embellishing the fish print. Whereas down below, the rainbow trout is embellished with rubbings of different varieties of seaweeds. And the backgrounds get even more complicated. Next slide, please. There is contemporary artist that is exploring doing sumi-e prints. Next slide. He's a resident of California, and he is doing an exquisite job with doing nature printing with all types of plants and animals in the sumi-e fashion. Next slide, please. Now we're going to go into some of my works. These are different pieces that I did at an exhibition, some of my plant prints from Costa Rica and some of the vineyards. Next slide, please. This is a combination of a lei and a snapper and a woven mat from Hawaii. Next slide. Involved in nature printing is memory making. And these are a couple of really good examples showing a photograph of the fisherman fishing at the location where he actually caught the big trout below him. And I've enhanced that nature print with acrylic and watercolor to complete the scene. And on the left, we have a contemporary piece with Bob Hall Pier, with the wave and fishermen on the pier, and then small tarpon printed below. Next slide, please. Again, some more recent examples of my work with texture and some whimsy with the plate and the plant rubbings of cilantro and the other animals that are done on the handmade paper on the plate. Next slide, please. These are rubbings of sea turtles, the collage with different handmade papers. And on the right, there is a school of speckled trout in a more contemporary fashion. Next slide, please. And the size is not an element to me. The bigger the better sometimes. More recently, I printed a large tuna that was approaching 700 pounds. And I think when we hung it in the stairwell at the man's house, it was 12 feet long. Next slide, please. This is a contemporary background done in acrylic with the sailfish collaged onto the piece. Next slide, please. Another more contemporary treatment of the nature printing with a textured background with the fish prints collaged onto the piece and accompanying acrylic pieces. Next slide. Now we're approaching my bucket list. Because I've been printing fish and other creatures and plants over 50 years, there are things that I want to find and print. And one example is the alligator that is hanging from the rafters at that exhibition. And on the left is a rubbing that I was doing actually in Egypt of a Nile perch. Next slide, please.
That's it.
I hope you've enjoyed this tour of nature printing. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dinah. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but it was another fascinating presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dinah. And,
Question. I have a question.
oh, okay, go ahead, Penny.
Do you catch your own fish sometimes, or do you rely on the fishermen?
Both. I like to fish, I like to eat fish, and I like to create my own memories. And so, yes, I do fish, and we do use quite a number of pieces caught by other fishermen.
Good.
Well, thanks again, Dinah. And like I say, I've always was fascinated by your work. And with that, that's all of our programs. And now I'm going to, before I turn it over to Bart, I just want to mention that for our survey drawing this month, we're going to, Dr. Mendoza-Garcia has donated one of her books, Dancing Through Mexican History, and that will be our drawing prize. And we really appreciate that. So some lucky winner need to be filling out those past meeting surveys if you can get you a great prize. So Bart, oh, look at there. Susan's got her marigold, perfect.
Well, thank you for all of our visitors that are visiting with us. Hopefully sometime in the near future, maybe after the first of the year, we'll be able to start the in-person events again, and maybe even do a combination of online and in person. So we look forward to those, and we thank everyone for attending us with us and being with us today. If y'all are ready, we can start our board meeting. Mike, do you have anything else?
No, that's that. Like Bart says, that concludes our program for today. And in a few minutes, we're going to be moving into our board meeting. It's open to the public, but thank y'all once again for everybody for joining. We really appreciate y'all joining us, and we look forward to seeing each other in person in the future. But we really appreciate all the presenters today and did the great job. And we really appreciate that. Like Nancy said, those were some really nice programs and presentations. And